Today we will discuss an RC passage from chapter 12 on race and caste discrimination and focus more on the inferential level of meaning. Okay, let us start by reading the passage. The Union government's present position vis-a-vis the upcoming United Nations Conference on Racial and Related Discrimination Worldwide seems to be the following. Discussed race, please, not caste. Caste is our very own and not at all as bad as you think. So, from the very first line, you know that there is some UN conference being held, and the topic of the conference is racial and related discrimination worldwide. So, that means all corners of the world where there's racial and related discrimination, that seems to be the subject matter of this conference, where India as such is not involved because India is not known, or there is no problem of racial and related discrimination, at least outwardly. India is not known for racial and related discrimination. So India really does not have any role in such a UN conference. But apparently, uh, there are some Dalit leaders who are trying to suggest that we should include caste also in this UN conference. Since they're discussing race, why not caste? Why not get caste into it as well? So the union government position as a response to such a demand by Dalit leaders for including caste is this: discuss race, please, not caste. So they are rejecting the demand for including caste and saying that caste is India's own problem and not at all as bad as you think. That means not like your racial problem where white supremacy and how white supremacists treat blacks even at this stage with such, let's say, repugnance, and how they segregate them in society. So government's position is this in response to the request of Dalit leaders for including caste. This is not being discussed at the UN level at all. This government and UN is not coming. This is just an internal discussion taking place within the country through editorials in the newspaper. So this is some editorial which is written by a person who obviously supports that caste also should be included in such a conference. So he is saying now, the author of this editorial or opinion column in an Indian newspaper is saying the gross hypocrisy of that position has been lucidly underscored by Dalit leaders. That means this government is taking a very hypocritical position, blaming the West for race problems and not blaming itself for the caste problem, right? Which Dalit leaders are so aware of how bad caste is in our country. So, the central government, the union government means the central government is being hypocritical in this regard. Explicitly, on the outside, the world community is to be cheated out of considering the matter of caste on the technicality that it is not like race. Race is a different category, caste is a different category. So you please discuss race, leave caste alone, leave it to us. And internally, we are told to those people who are raising their voice that please put caste on this UN conference agenda, that if you put caste on that agenda, you will bring out all the muck, all the dirt that is there in Indian society and the human right violations that upper caste commit on lower caste. So we are patriotically admonished that be patriots and don't damage the bloody country's image by suggesting that caste be included in such a conference. So this is the position of the government. Author's comment on that is somehow India's virtual beliefs elbow out concrete actualities. So, what are India's virtual beliefs? that caste is our own and not at all as bad as you think, while concrete actuality is that caste is a curse on a society. Despite Mandal Commission and everything else, despite all the reservation and all the other affirmative action taken to uplift lower castes, caste still persists in our mind and atrocities continue to be committed on lower castes. That is the concrete actuality. And then the author comments, inverted representations, as we know, have often been deployed in human histories as balm for the forsaken, religion being the most persistent of such inversions. So, inverted representation of religion would be what? Religion is meant to tell us that we are all children of the same God. So, we are all equal, right? We all have the same Atma, which is part of that Paramatma. So, this is what religion is supposed to tell us. But its inverted representation says something else, right? Let's say in the Indian context, it talks of karma. So, Dalit is told कि बेटा तेरा कर्मा ही ऐसा था that you've been born as a Dalit, right? So lead a good life in whatever state you are. Next time when you're reborn, in your reincarnation, transmigration of your soul, you'll be born in a upper caste if you behave good now. So religion is virtually invertedly represented to that Dalit person who is suffering the atrocities of upper caste, that listen, you got to bear it, you got to put up with all this nonsense. It is your fault after all, or your karma of past lives that is causing all this. Similarly, in the Western context, Karl Marx said religion is the opiate of the masses. So the rich people keep the poor people uh, let's say, opiated in a state of drug induced stupor, right? The poor people have to bear their, uh, let's say, unprivileged and misery and poverty and hunger only because they are told that the kingdom of heaven is there for you, for the meek and the humble. So be meek and humble. Don't rebel against the order of things. Let the rich enjoy. Let them exploit you. Take the suffering because you'll be rewarded by this in heaven. Because in heaven, all the meek and humble will have a place. So that acts as balm for the forsaken. So he has been forsaken by society. He's suffering, miserable. But this promise that in heaven he'll be looked after, right, by God, who will reward him for his patience, for his being meek and humble throughout his life and being a good man, that keeps him accepting his oppression. And the oppressor, the upper caste, the rich people in society, the upper classes, they all continue to exploit him by using religion, by invertedly representing religion in this way. On one hand, the karma theory, on the other hand, the promise of heaven for the meek and humble. So, this is what the author is conveying, that this is how the poor people and the lower caste get exploited in our society. Then he says, yet we means we editorial board or we intellectuals would humbly submit that if globalizing our markets are thought good for the national pocket, so at that time when this article came out, uh, India was, let's say, liberalizing and globalizing its economy and reaping the benefits of globalization. So everybody agreed that globalizing our markets has been good for the Indian economy. So what he's saying is that if that is good for our economy, why don't we globalize our social inequities? Social inequities are a caste system where a society has inequalities. The society is stratified into different castes which are unequal. Why don't we globalize this? Globalize here obviously relates to having caste being included in the UN conference, on the agenda of the UN conference. So globalizing a social inequities might not be so bad for the mass of our people. Now, what does this mean? So, if caste is discussed in a UN conference and the human right abuses being conducted by upper caste in our country is exposed to the world, we'll have so much international pressure on our country that will put in all kinds of effort to ensure that our bad name is not further sullied. We'll try to improve the situation by better policing, by better policies within our country, looking after the lower caste in a better way so that their exploitation stops. So, globalizing our social inequities might not be so bad for the mass of our people. So, this is what he's suggesting, that we should include caste in the discussions at the UN conference. After all, and he is giving an analogy that remember that racism was as uniquely institutionalized in South Africa. You're all aware of the apartheid in South Africa, where whites and blacks were segregated in society. Blacks went to different, kids went to different public schools, there were different shopping centers where they shop, there were different public toilets for whites and blacks. The whole white and black communities were segregated. That was the apartheid in South Africa. Just as caste, we are segregated on caste lines in our villages and other places. So there, India was one of the leaders against racism because of Mahatma Gandhi having been in South Africa, etc., and where Indians, due to racial discrimination, were treated badly as second rate citizens. So we fought and we galvanized the whole world and the Commonwealth nations in all the Commonwealth, meetings and non-aligned meetings, wherever we went, we kept trying to talk about apartheid in South Africa. And finally, apartheid in South Africa was dismantled. Nelson Mandela came to power, and the rest is history, which you are aware, right? So he's giving the example there that that happened in South Africa. Why, if caste is now discussed in the UN conference and India's poor human rights record is exposed, India will have to again dismantle our caste system like they dismantled their apartheid system. So why then can't we permit the world community to express itself on the latter, means on caste discrimination, with a fraction of the zeal with which through the years we pronounced on the former, on racism in South Africa? So we've been great votaries of dismantling of apartheid in South Africa. Every forum, Indira Gandhi's voice used to be the loudest against racism. Now, why can't we let others criticize us for caste? So he is exposing the hypocrisy through and through. So in the first para, the issue is being discussed, why not include caste, and how the central government's position is hypocritical, and how it will be good if it's included, but we are hypocritical in this matter. So let's see how he develops it further. Right. So in the second para, he says, as to the technicality about whether or not caste is admissible into the agenda about race, right? Some reputed sociologist has said that race is, after all, a biological category, caste is a social one. So they are in a way incompatible, they are different. So therefore, technically, caste doesn't fit into a UN conference on race, right? Because this is what he had mentioned in para 1 to say that on the technicality that caste is different from race, you don't want to put caste there. So now he is commenting about the person who, the sociologist who has highlighted this distinction, technical distinction, that race is a biological category and caste is a social one. Now he's commenting on that sociologist probably hypocrisy or whatever, that having earlier fiercely opposed implementation of the Mandal Commission report. Now, Mandal Commission report was about giving the extra reservation to the OBCs, that 27%, right? So he had opposed it. He had opposed that we should give a reservation to lower castes or to other backward castes, right? Now he is saying that caste is a social category. Now, category of what? Of discrimination, obviously, on the basis of which you, when you are categorizing your society, either you treat everybody equal in an egalitarian society. If you are categorizing them on any basis, whether biological or social, you are still categorizing them and therefore treating them differently. And then the question of then discrimination comes in. So, by saying that caste is a social category, he is indirectly admitting that caste discrimination exists in our country. So, the said sociologist is at least to be complimented now. Earlier, he said caste does not exist, so we should not give them extra reservation. So, caste, the other backward classes should not be given reservation because that is not an issue. Now, at least by admitting that caste is a social category, he's at least admitting that caste discrimination exists in our country. It's a real thing. So he should be complimented for that. He should be appreciated for saying that. Though, in his view, it is not compatible with racial, because racial is based on biological factors and caste is based. But he's at least accepting that it exists, that people are discriminated on the basis of the caste as well as their race. So earlier he had opposed such a position, now he's at least accepting it indirectly. One would like quickly, okay, so the rest, one would like quickly to offer the hypothesis that biology in important ways that affect the lives of many people is in itself perhaps a social construction. So this is a point he doesn't delve on, so let's leave that alone. But let us look at the matter in another way. So he now turns let's see now the whole issue in this way. So the UN conference aspect is over, and why caste should be included, why caste as a technicality is being excluded, what is the logic being presented by this sociologist, etc. So now he's coming to his own thoughts on the matter, both on caste and racial discrimination or discrimination in general. So para 3 starts by saying, if it is agreed as per the position today at which anthropological and allied scientific determinations rest, that means anthropology and related genetics and other evolutionary biologists, etc., 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 including Darwin and Darwin's out of Africa theory, the entire race of Homo sapiens derived from an originary black African female called Eve. This includes the Bible, the Old Testament, the book of Genesis, in which it is said that God made the earth, then he made Adam and Eve and put them in the Garden of Eden, and from there the human race, the Homo sapien race, emerged. And if you combine what Bible has said with what Darwin and other people are saying, that Homo sapiens originally originated in Africa, and then from there with pressure of requirement of food and other factors, they moved to Europe, to Middle East, to India, and to China, etc., etc. Right? So if we combine what Bible has to say and what anthropology and evolutionary theories have to say, the entire race of humans, that means we all humans derived from, because it was in Africa, so God made Eve and Adam there. So Eve and Adam must have been black, Negroid race, right? So putting it in Hindi, it will sound like this: कि हम सब एक काली हबशी औरत के बच्चे हैं. So that is what is emerging, right? The entire race of human sapiens are derived from a original black Habshi Aurat called Eve. So if that is true, that we are all children of a black originary mother, then why are we now fighting over, that you're from this race, you're from that? We're the children of the same mother, damn it. So why are we ontological? Ontology is a school of philosophy which discusses how the innate nature of people, that like body and soul and other aspects, that what is a human being. So on some ontological, we are making distinctions between different castes or between different races. So how can we do that when our human knowledge tells us that we are all derived from one originary black African female called Eve? Okay, so he is now getting to the point that there should be no discrimination. We are all equal after all. We are all probably children of a Eve, or I mean, this is particularly a slap on the white supremacists who treat black as the lower race or genetically inferior to them, to say, "Arey yaar, Eve to black hi thi," right? And you Christians, you white supremacists, you believe that white white races are superior. So after all, you're children of a black Eve. Okay. So let's move on further. Let us also underline the distinction between the supposition that we are all God's children. This is what Christianity says, and the rather more substantiated argument about our descent from Eve, which he has already explained. Okay, so we are children of the same God. We are children of the same mother Eve in Africa, Garden of Eden in Africa. Okay, so therefore, all the distinctions that have been made are human constructs. So it then stands to reason that all subsequent distinctions between races or caste or other things, right, are constructed ones. We humans have constructed them. And on what basis have we constructed them? We have, it is all, why did we construct such differences? Because of the changing equations between knowledge and power among human communities through contested histories here, there, and everywhere. So the whites became more powerful, they invented fire, they got better tools, so they became superior, and they then suppressed the other races. So then they tried to treat other races as inferior, though all were children of the same God, born from the same mother. All these later distinctions happened because of how some people acquired knowledge first, which gave them power, and through that they subjugated other races and other communities and other peoples, right? And thereby all these distinctions came about in history, which are constructed by people, not by God. So basically, we are the same. So he is building grounds to show that all humans are equal, and that is the position he will end with. So let's move forward. So this line of thought that we are all children of one God and of one mother, and that all the distinctions are all man-made, so they are not so important, right? So such a line of thinking is supported by the findings of the Human Genome Project, which says, which denies genetic difference between races, which says that there's no difference between races, while 19th century colonial persuasions. So the whole logic of colonizing the world by the white races was that the white races are superior to all the other races, so they should go and teach the barbarian races how to live a good life. They should civilize them and teach them the good things that the white races know, right? And also bring them in the fold of the same one God and spread Christianity throughout the world. That was the whole logic of colonialism. And obviously, trade, take their raw material and feed our industry and give them, the economic factors, of course, were there, but the moral justification for colonialism was that it's a white man's burden. White man, which is superior, God has made him superior, and therefore it is his burden to go and civilize these barbarian races who worship trees, God, sun, etc., right? Who are economically so poor, underdeveloped. Now, all that thing about racial superiority of the white, all that has been undone or proven wrong by the findings of the Human Genome Project, which says that there's no genetic difference between races, right? So, if that be so, how did races come about? So, if anything, they suggest that environmental factors. So, races were created by environmental factors. They impinge on the genes as a dialectic seems to unfold between nature and culture. We had come across this word dialectic earlier, interplay of forces. So, nature is the environmental factors, or no? Nature is the gene function. That means your genes is your nature. Culture is your environmental factors. So, your genes and the environment have interplayed. So, let's say Homo sapiens were in Africa, right? And they were black. They were a Negroid race. They were in the open sun with the sun, blazing sun shining on them. They didn't wear clothes at all. They all became black, right? So that's how we started as human race, Homo sapien race. Then people gradually, settled down, uh, got food, and population became wider, sources of food became scarce, so people started moving elsewhere. Those who went to Europe in colder climate, who lived in forests under the shelter of trees, away from the harsh, to in northern altitude, away from the harsh sun, they gradually became white, right? They hunt, hunted animals within forests, ate fruits from trees. So those were all their culture and environmental factors. So they became white. And then from there, gradually over the millennia, they moved through Persia, etc., to India, to China. So they from white they became brown, right? Persia, India, and then they went to China again, northern altitudes. So they became yellow. So the Mongoloid races are called the yellow races, but the skin color is not exactly white. Okay, so the races actually developed because of, so genes were part of it, yes, but environment which acted on it, right? So it would thus seem that biology as a constitution of pigmentation, that means the skin color changed. So the biology which is a factor which changes, which distinguishes one race from another, it is not the gene. Genetically, there's no difference. You're not superior. White are not superior to black. The biology is only as far as skin, it's only skin deep as far as pigmentation of the skin is concerned. You're black or white based on the environmental factors that have had an influence on you, right? So now he comes back. So he disproves that there is a that one race is superior to another, and shows that races difference is only restricted to skin color, while deep inside we are all the same. Genetically, we are all the same. So, taken together, the originary mother stipulation that we are all children of one black mother called Eve, and human genome findings, which say that genetically there is no difference between all of us. So this should furnish grounds for human equality across the board, that we human beings are one big family, which Indians have always believed in, the universal brotherhood of mankind, right? So, and therefore, if we are all equal, then we should have such policies in our management of the global world or global economy that there is equitable distribution of wealth, right? Aimed at building a global order which is morally right. In Hegel's steering formulation, only the rational constitutes the right. So that means if we are all equal, then there should be no difference between a developed nation, developing nation, rich, poor. All these should not exist. We should follow such policies that everybody leads a similar standard of living, right? Enjoys the same rights and freedoms and privileges. That is the only logical thing to do. And Hegel said that anything that is logical is morally right. So it would be only morally right if we have the universal brotherhood of mankind guide our policies to make everybody on the earth equal in real terms, in terms of economics, socially. There should be no discrimination against anybody. So, this is his basic argument, let alone that UN conference now that he resolved in the first two paras. Then he started building that basically we are all equal, but sadly, and then he ends on a note of resignation. But sadly, such sadly is not the case, as every day fresh arbitrary grounds for discrimination are constructed in the interests of sectional dominance. So just because one race wants to dominate another or one group wants to dominate another, we keep finding new grounds for discrimination. So this is how he ends his thinking. It is not, there is no unity of thought. There are two separate thoughts. One is to sort out that issue, that why not include caste, right? The argument related to that, and then he switches to the arguments related to why we human beings are all equal and therefore should follow policies. That would be the only morally right thing to do because it is the most logical thing to do. So with this he ends his passage. So you have found a mind map of his thought flow. So now we are ready to go to answer the questions. Okay, I'm keeping the numbers of the questions same as it is in the Wiley Cat VRC book. So the very first question here is the 11th question. So based on the passage, which broad areas unambiguously fall under the purview of the UN conference? The UN conference is about race and related discrimination. That means related to race. So A says racial prejudice. So that causes the discrimination. Racial pride, you can have pride without, discriminating with another. So that's out. Discrimination, racial or otherwise. Now, otherwise could be anything. It could be gender, it could be. So this is vague. While the very question says unambiguously. So C is ambiguous. D caste is not part of the UN conference. That only Indian intellectuals within India are raising the issue that why caste should not be discussed. After all, it will help the poor in the lower caste in India. So D is out. E, race related discrimination. So A and E, option 1, unambiguously. So don't get confused with all the discussions taking place. Just that line, racial and related discrimination, from those words A and E are your answers. So option 1. When the author writes globalizing our social inequities, obviously we discussed it is referring to putting caste on the agenda of the UN conference so that globalized, it becomes global knowledge. Everybody begins to have a take on it, have a say on it, criticize us for it, right? Or praise us for his whatever. So discussions on the social inequities that exist in India on the basis of caste. This is what this uh, meaning and context of this phrase was referring to. So going beyond an internal deliberation on social inequity. Deliberation means discussion. So yes, one is what he's trying to say. Let's say others dealing with internal poverty through economic benefits. This is not here. This was the issue in para 1 was only a discussion, including cost caste in the agenda. Going beyond an internal delimitation of social inequity. We are only talking of discussion. We are not actually saying that uh, instead of limiting caste to India, we should globalize caste as a concept. And in America also, let them also have Brahmins, Kshatriyas. We are not trying to say that. While three option is virtually saying that we should import our concept of caste as something good to be followed by the world, right? So go beyond an internal delimitation that we shouldn't limit caste to India, we should promote it as a concept to be followed abroad. So, three is obviously wrong. It is only meant to discuss caste in the UN conference. Okay, let's move forward. Right, we discussed in the very first para how globalizing our social inequities might not be so bad for the mass of our people. So he's suggesting that if you include caste in this UN conference, there'll be enough international pressure after that to criticize us on the human rights abuses being perpetrated by upper caste and lower caste in our country, which will bring a bad name to India. So everyone within India and that international pressure all will work for the betterment of the conditions of the lower caste. And he quotes the example of Africa, how the apartheid in Africa and how globalizing those social inequities or racism in Africa, how that led to the dismantling of the apartheid in Africa, South Africa, and how the blacks' position improved. They became equal citizens along with the whites, and they're leading a far higher standard of living and a better life today. So, what cannot be inferred from this? Now, this cannot be inferred questions are a little tricky. So, first you must see what can be inferred. So, India will become a pariah state, means an outcast state in the comity of nations once its poor human rights record against lower castes is exposed. Right? So, will that help the poor? Pariah state means all economic sanctions will be imposed on you. You will not be all sports people will discontinue playing sports, cultural, any kind of economic activity with your nation. So isolating a nation as a pariah state is going to harm everybody in that country, including the poor, the lower caste. So that is certainly not going to help the mass of the people or anybody in India, even the upper caste or lower caste. So one is going to be very damaging if this is the extreme action that international community takes against India. So one obviously cannot be inferred from the not so bad for the masses. It has to be good for the masses. One is going to be bad for the masses. So let's look at 2, 3, 4. They should all be good for the masses. So international pressure in the form of censure in world forums and economic sanctions will propel the Indian government into action for upliftment of the lower caste. So Indians will have to show, see, we are following this policy. There's so many villages, there's lower caste. Today they have pakka houses with electricity, water. Their special schools have been made for them. So all kinds of things to show that listen, we are trying to uh, uh, undo the curse that is there in our historically in our country. Three, international aid agencies, NGOs, will focus greater attention in ameliorating means bettering the condition of the lower caste. So the focus of NGOs and other UN agencies and other agencies becomes the lower caste. So obviously it'll be good for the masses. Affirmative action by Indian corporate sector. Let's say a company like Infosys, which is a MNC. Now it would like it'll direct all its CSR activities of all companies will be directed towards lower caste because they want to improve their image as well as the country's image. So that will be good for the masses. So once it's uh, a knowledge in the world that caste as a curse exists in India, even the Indian corporate sector will put in effort to, bring up. They'll give jobs to people from lower caste. They'll uh, undertake special training programs for them. So all that is going to be good for the lower caste. By the way, these were the kind of issues that were under discussion about Indian corporate sector helping, in the CSR activity to uplift the poor. Okay, so 13 answer is one, that is the one which cannot be inferred because that will be harmful for the masses as well as everyone, while 2, 3, 4 will help the lower caste because everything will now get targeted on the lower caste. This problem will get a sharper focus of the Indian government, of NGOs, international aid agencies, and the more enlightened Indian corporates who have a global image to project. According to the author, inverted representations as balm for the forsaken. So we've discussed this already. So religion is represented in an inverted way, merely to oppress the forsaken and give him a balm that, okay, you're miserable, we are exploiting you, right? So you will get a place in heaven, damn it. God will look after you. Be patient, humble, and meek. Right? Do good karmas this life. Next life will be better. I promise you. Okay, so all that acts as balm for the forsaken. So the people of the lower caste and the poor, they feel, oh yes, there is hope for us. So, and they give it the sanction of religion. Karma theory, as religion says, the heaven is for the meek and the humble, as Christianity says. So, with the backing of religion, the poor get convinced that yes, let us just bear our oppression. So, this is done by the rich, the privileged, the powerful to keep the poor, the lower caste oppressed. So, this occurs often as a means of keeping people oppressed. So, option is 3. We don't even have to look at other options. Right, question 15. This takes us back to para 2, where the technicality about race being a biological category and caste being a social category is concerned. So the author is saying that sociologist who earlier did not accept that caste discrimination existed because he opposed the Mandal Commission report, right? Now he is accepting the fact that caste is a social category. So indirectly he is accepting that it's a social category. That means society is divided in some categories and obviously there is some discrimination based on them. So he is accepting indirectly that there is discrimination based on some social category called caste. So option 4, he is admitting indirectly that caste-based discrimination or prejudice exists, though it is not compatible with the biological category, which is race. So racial discrimination also exists on the basis of biological category, and caste discrimination exists on the basis of a social category, and both exist. So by admitting that these two categories are there, he is indirectly saying that discrimination on the basis of these two categories exists in society. While option 2 is a option trap laid for you because of the word tangentially. You say you're more likely to try to match words. So CAT examiner particularly lays traps. So when words match, you should view that option with great suspicion. You should say, Sala mujhe phasana chata hai. This should be the first thought in your mind when you see matching words. not the other way around. Don't jump at it. Oh, yes, I got it. Okay. So, tangentially admits to the existence of caste as a category. That's not what he said. Indirectly admits that caste discrimination exists when earlier he said caste discrimination did not exist. Caste obviously is a category, it is a social category. So, what is tangentially about it? He is admitting that he is saying it that caste is a social category and race is a biological category. So, there's nothing about tangentially admitting it. This is doing it explicitly, right? Overtly. So, just by repeating the word tangentially and distorting the rest of the part, you are being trapped, you are being snared into a trap. So, be careful about such traps. Question 16. Which of the following can be understood from the phrase ontological distinction? So, ontology is innate nature, distinction on the basis of innate nature. Like colonial uh, thinking was that white people genetically superior than the other races. So that gave them that insight within ourselves. Our very nature is different. We are meant genetically, we are made, our minds are superior, our thinking, our ingenuity, whatever, right? So obviously here option 3 simply is a vocabulary question. Ontology, if you know, clearly distinction based on innate nature. Let's move ahead. Seventh question. An important message in the passage. If one accepts a dialectic, an interplay between nature and culture, nature is your biology, your genes, culture is your environment, and based on your environment, how you lived, organized living together. So, that interaction, as we saw while we were discussing the passage, resulted in different environmental factor acting on the genes and changing the skin color and maybe certain bodily features and facial features, right? So let's see the options. The results of the Human Genome Project reinforce racial differences. This is opposite of what is said in the passage. Race is at least partially a social construct. So race is a social construct. So that means culture, environment, social. These are synonymous being used. Nature, biology, genes, they are being synonymously used. So obviously, gene plays a role and the environment plays a role. So environment means social. So there are different races because the environment has impinged on gene function and created different change the very physical structure, facial structure, skin pigmentation. So, therefore, race is partially social or cultural or environment and partially genetic in a way. So, 2 obviously is what is emerging. So, 2 is the option. Discrimination is at least partially a social construct. All discrimination are only human constructs. Otherwise, we are by God equal. Innately, ontologically, we are equal. We are from the same mother, Eve, right? We are the same children of God. So, 3 obviously is not from this part of the passage. Caste is at least partially a social construct. Caste doesn't come into this nature and culture thing where the skin pigmentation changes, etc. etc. Okay, 18. What cannot be inferred? Again, cannot be inferred. So be careful. That means 3 can be inferred, 1 cannot. So there's an odd man out. From the author's statement that all forms of distinction are constructed ones. That because we are basically same, any distinction on race, caste, or any other, right? Religion, obviously, and others, right? Attribute to changing equations between knowledge and power. So we discussed if one group discussed even invented fire, you see, or invented the wheel, they got tremendous, that knowledge gave them tremendous advantage over others and tremendous power and reach in their transportation, in their quality of their tools, in their fighting ability, in their food gathering ability, and then gradually, they tried to overpower others and become more and use others to perform the dirty labor, and they became the rulers. So, this is how human society built, right? And they kept treating others as slaves or serfs and kept exploiting them. So, human communities have constantly fought with one another for sectional dominance. Yes, that's what human history has been all about. And knowledge and power, whoever had more knowledge and power won. Distinctions between humans on the basis of race are not intrinsic, yes, but a result of some communities having acquired more knowledge and power than others owing to historical factors. Yes, so we are basically same, but whites got more knowledge and power and became more powerful, so they exploited others. Colonial Raj, they were industrial revolution happened in the uh, among the white races. They became more powerful. Then they came and colonized the world in their ships, traded with them, started as trading partners, and then gradually conquered them and exploited them. So, two can be inferred. Caste is based on the principle of division of labor, and hence distinctions on the basis of caste are constructed ones. Yes, caste originally started, let's say, as a division of labor, as is being said here. If that is true, if a barber's son could only be a barber, a shoemaker's son could be a shoemaker, and so on and so forth, and caste was done for the convenience of a vertical division of labor in society, then it has been constructed by human beings, but it has not been done from knowledge and power. So, this brings out an economic principle at work of division of labor, a management principle that you have to divide. One man cannot do everything, so you have to divide up the work. So, this does not directly, is not inferable from how knowledge and power gave more, this thing to one section to dominate over others. So, hence, 3 cannot be inferred from that statement. While 4 says there are no innate differences between different human communities, so it supports that all are constructed ones. And they are constructed ones based on knowledge and power. That aspect doesn't really feature here also. But caste is clearly, option 3, it clearly says on an economic principle or a management principle. So there clearly it's not based on knowledge and power. 4 is doesn't state so. Since you have to tick only one, option 3. Okay, last two questions. The ninth question, number 19. Which of the following cannot be inferred? Again, cannot be inferred. From the author's reference to the chiefly 19th century colonial persuasions on the subject of race, which clearly was about the superiority of the white races, and therefore they had the right to civilize the barbarians, even if it required violence and teaching them their position in life, right? So let's look at the options. Colonialism was a form of racial despotism. Yes, the rulers came with guns. They fought wars. They subdued any kind of native rebellion. So they were despotic in their nature and they exploited them economically. They exploited their labor for their benefit. So, two, colonialism was based on the concept of white man's burden and was largely beneficial in its effects. Now, yes, it was based on white man's burden as a moral justification, but in reality, it was not for the benefit for the colonies or the native people. It was to exploit them economically and otherwise, right? So this largely beneficial doesn't fit into the thinking that existed related to race at that time. They came to exploit. They came to because they clearly saw they had more power, knowledge, and ability, and the others were disorganized. They did not have weapons to fight back or any resources, so they just could easily walk into any place and exploit their resources. Colonialism, so two cannot be inferred. Let's see the others. Colonialism was based on the concept of superiority of one race over another. Yes. Colonialism was based on the concept of genetic differences. Yes, that one is different, therefore is superior. So option one, two is the answer because of the largely beneficial. Okay, question 20 from the last para. So, by quoting Hegel in the last para of the passage, what precise message is the author conveying? So, humans should build a global order based on what is rational and what is right. Yes, this is what he wants to say, but what is that rational and what is that right? That has not been spelled out in one, which has been in two. So, science and rationality. Now, science is added there. The word science was not used, but rationality obviously comes from a scientific temper, and the whole human genome project and other things are scientific, right? The whole field of genetics is scientific. So, science and rationality show. So, human genome project and basic logic of the originary mother theory and all religious theory of children of one God show that humans are equal, right? And just skin color is different. And hence only an egalitarian, where all humans are equal global order is morally right. So it is morally wrong to discriminate on the basis of race or caste or any other constructed form, right? Because logically, scientifically, genetically, we are all equal, and therefore it is only morally right that if we are all equal, our whole social structure and organized system should work for the benefit of all in equal measure. So two is his final message, and then of course he says sadly this doesn't happen. Okay. Three, it is morally right to be rational. Being rational is morally right. So this is kind of converse of that. Four, it is not rational that one section should dominate another. So that obviously, if you are all equal, then why should one section dominate another? So this was a marathon session, but interesting issue being discussed, right? I hope you have benefited from the discussions. Thank you.